So hi everyone and welcome to the webinar called Stress Identification and Management, an introduction to using a mind, body and spirit approach, which has been arranged for members of the South Yorkshire Women Inspired Network as part of our campaign for Stress Awareness Month in April. So my name is Caroline Brannigan and I'm Head of Health and Wellbeing on the Network Committee. Liz Leggett, Deputy Head of Health and Wellbeing, is also supporting the session today. So just want to start with a quick background about the network for anyone who's not familiar. So the network exists to inspire, empower and elevate women from all backgrounds to reach their full potential. Our network offers a dedicated space where women can connect, lead and thrive, supported by mentorship, shared learning and leadership development tailored to their lived experiences. We offer regular webinars, inspirational talks and events, as well as career mentoring and other offers. I'll put a link in the chat for our Linktree, which contains our main links, including our website, a form to join the network if you're not already a member, and our social media pages where we post regularly. So we'd encourage you to follow us on there. The session will be recorded and slides will be added to the Women's Network website. A link is on the Linktree that I'll put in the chat. If I can ask you all to remain on mute during the session, and if you do have any questions or comments, please pop them in the chat and there'll be time for questions at the end and potentially throughout as well through some of the activities that we're doing. And I'd now like to introduce Ranaa. Thank you.
Hello, hi, thank you for having me. Thank you everybody for joining. I'm really excited to be here and share with you. So yeah, my name's Ranaa, and just to give you a brief introduction, I will explain who I am and what I do a little bit more as we go on, but I'm a life coach and a former GP, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my mind, body, spirit approach to stress management. And as I go through the session, hopefully you will understand that this is not anything that is woo or requires any spiritual beliefs. It's very much grounded in who we are as humans, and our human spirit, because I think it's one of those things which might sound silly, but it's often in this modern day and age, it's easy to forget that we are, underneath all of it, we are human. But yeah, we're kind of expected to go through life like robots sometimes, or at least that's my experience. So let's crack on. So this photo, I mean, you know, photos can sometimes convey more than words can. But if I said to you that, you know, modern life is stressful, I think most of us will probably agree that, especially as women, we are often juggling so many things, whether that's at work or at home or just in our life in general. The picture I was referring to, as I said, we could probably all add a few post-it notes to that, but we're certainly juggling a lot. I'm sure we can agree. So if this resonates for everybody, just put a yes into the chat box if you want to, just to see what the general feeling is in the room today. Are we seeing any yeses? Because I can't.
Yeah, lots of yeses coming through.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, and it's easy because modern life expects so much of us. Quite often it's easy to think that we need to have this perfect routine, that we need to do more, that we need to add another thing to our already probably very long list of to-do list. We feel like we just need to be a little bit more productive.
I'm going to come off this chat in a minute, but yeah, if you just use the chat, the link that's in the chat.
If everyone could make sure they're mute, please.
Other call. This isn't the right session.
Thank you. Yeah, it can feel like we just need to be a little bit more productive, and that's such a common thing for all of us to think. And what happens when we do that is that it becomes almost like this, that we need to take more action, and it's kind of like almost a never-ending thing. And what I want to remind you is that it isn't always about the actions that we're taking, it's about our inner state. And what I mean by that is, who are we under the surface? What state are we operating from? Are we operating from a state of stress, a survival state, or are we operating from a more regulated, calm state? And I'll explain this concept a little bit more as I go on. And today what I want to do really is not just talk at you. It's going to be hopefully a few minutes for you to reflect on some of these questions for yourself, relate them back to your life, and I will be guiding you through a few moments of hopefully a little bit of calm for you as we go on. So if that sounds okay, let's begin. And I want to just begin with a mindful moment. And this is just a couple of minutes, and it's something that you can actually do very easily yourself, because what often happens is that we are often here in our mind. We're thinking, we're predicting, we're worrying about the past, things that happened in the past, what we did, or we're planning and we're predicting what's going to happen in the future. We're worrying about things that haven't happened yet. And it's actually quite rare that we're fully in the present moment. So this little exercise is something that's really useful to kind of have in your toolbox. It's something that you can do when you just notice that your mind is racing and you want to come back to the here and now. So I invite you, if you are able to just pop your feet flat on the ground if you can. And we're going to keep our eyes open for the moment. And I want to take you through the 5 senses. So this, some of you may have already heard of the 5 senses technique. This is just a concise version of it, really. So first of all, what I'd like you to do is just have a look around you, wherever you are, and just notice something. Just see what you can see. You don't have to name it. You don't have to write anything down or anything. We're just simply noticing. And perhaps just try and notice something that you wouldn't normally notice. So for example, the texture of something. So I'm looking at a book that's on my desk in front of me, and I'm just noticing that it's got a few kind of wrinkles on the surface on the book. It's an old book, so it's quite wrinkled. So yeah, just notice something that you wouldn't normally notice. So that's seeing. And then just notice, what can you hear? Obviously you can hear my voice. I will quieten down for a moment. Just notice what you can hear, any background noise or so on. And then just notice what you can feel. And what I mean by that is your physical sensations. So can you notice the feeling of the chair beneath you? Perhaps you can notice how your clothes feel on your body. Just notice. And then what can you smell? And you might not be able to smell very much. That's okay. That is noticing something itself. So that's information as well. There's no right or wrong with this. But what can you smell? And then finally, what can you taste? Perhaps you can taste some coffee that you've just had, or I was going to say it's a bit early for lunch perhaps, but just notice. And if you can't taste anything, that's okay as well. And finally, just take a breath in through your nose and then exhale gently. And just allow yourself to arrive fully in this moment. Okay, so as I say, that's a variation on the 5 senses technique, and it's something that you can just run through in a minute. So if you ever find yourself feeling like I said, your mind is racing, running through that just helps you to come back, ground yourself in the present moment. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about who I am. This is a picture of me when I was working as a GP. I think it's about 2018 or so. And the reason I share it is because, well, one thing is that I don't really, now when I look back at this, I don't really recognize myself very much. And not just because physically I look different, I'm a few years older and my hair is clearly very different now, but I don't recognize myself because of how I remember that I felt in that moment. So just to give you a little summary, I was working as a GP in the NHS, and looking back now, I realized that I was just in this survival mode. I was constantly doing, it was all about working, not just in my job, but also at home, getting, ticking off all my to-do lists that I had. And I very rarely paused and considered what I wanted. I felt disconnected from myself, but I wasn't fully aware of it at the time. And then what happened was, oh, by the way, I had whispers of something over the years that was telling me that there's something else that I need to be doing, but I would just squash that down and ignore it, because what else could I be doing? I was a GP, it's what I trained to do. I had no other option in front of me. But then the pandemic happened, and it led me, for the first time in my life really, to stop and pause and ask myself some hard questions about who I was as a person, what I wanted to do in my life. And I'd known that I hadn't been fully happy as a GP, really. I mean, there were lots that I enjoyed about the work. The seeing patients was fulfilling, but there was a lot, as I'm sure a lot of you can understand, having working in the system, there was a lot that I just felt I was putting sticking plasters on, and it wasn't really making the difference that I knew I could or should be able to. And so the pandemic happened, and I decided to take a little break, and I started to do things that I enjoyed, which I hadn't done for a long time. So I started painting, which led me down the path of becoming a painter. So I became an abstract painter, and I won't go into the whole story, but to cut a very long story short, I discovered about the mind-body connection, how powerful our mind is, and how so much of who we think we are isn't about what success, the usual markers of success. It's about how we feel on the inside. And so I trained as a life coach, and now I help women kind of move into a life that feels as good as it looks on paper. So that's a little bit about me, and today I'm going to share a little bit with you about what I learned along that process, in that journey. So I've just got a little question here. As a GP, what percentage of conditions that I saw, which I didn't realise at the time, but what percentage do you think are stress related? Not necessarily fully caused by stress, but related to stress in some way, either exacerbated by it or caused by it to some degree. If people just want to hazard a guess. And if one of you could let me know if we're getting any figures in the chat box, please.
Yep, we've certainly got a high one at 80% going in there first, then 70, 75. So obviously there's quite a few people that think it would actually be quite high.
Yeah.
Another 70 there. So yeah, yep.
Well, you're all spot on. So the first figure, so the studies that have been done that show it's around 80 to 90%, which I think I didn't fully appreciate at the time when I was working. Obviously, I was trained about stress, but it was not at the level that I know now about how deeply stress impacts everyday life. And don't forget, I left actually GP in just at the start of the pandemic. So perhaps things have moved on since then, and we're getting more of a realization of how impactful stress can be. But certainly I feel personally it's one of the most under-recognized or under-recognized factors in chronic illness anyway. But the good news is that I feel we can make such an impact when we actually delve into this topic a bit further. So just to briefly tell you, I'm not going to go into lots of science about what stress is and why do we experience it. So the stress response is essentially our body and our brain responding to perceived danger. And it dates back to when we were living at a time when there were real physical threats to our danger. So we have saber-toothed tigers and other animals and other things that were physically a threat to us. And so, for example, when we encountered a tiger in the wild, we would either have to fight this tiger, we'd have to run away, or we would play dead. And so you probably have heard of the flight, fight, or freeze response. But nowadays, we don't have the same level of physical danger, yet our brain is responding. So our brain's role is just to keep us safe, physically safe, and it's constantly scanning our environment subconsciously without us realizing for any threats to safety. And even though we don't have the same physical dangers, we are responding to things such as these factors that you can see on the screen as if we're in physical danger. And of course, stress can be useful. So a small amount of stress can be useful when we've got a deadline to meet. We have to run for the bus because we're running late, or another situation. That little boost of adrenaline, those stress hormones, they can definitely help us. But the danger is when it becomes chronic, when we're responding to things like being stuck in a traffic jam, running late for meetings, when we're responding to lots of things without realizing it because it happens subconsciously. When we're doing that, there's no real pause in between. That's when stress becomes chronic, and it can impact our health in a big way. So we can divide causes of stress into external stresses, so things outside of us, such as major life changes, or internal, such as thoughts that we're thinking. And I also categorize stress into these two ways as well. So we have major stresses, but we can also have these micro stresses. And that's what I was referring to earlier, when we're going through our day and responding to those small moments, which we don't even realize often that we're doing. That is still stress. We're still responding in the same way as if we were in physical danger, and we're still releasing these stress hormones. So to put it all together and to bring in my approach, because when we often think about stress, we just think about our mind. We sometimes feel like it's just a psychological state, but so much research shows that stress doesn't just stay in the mind, because our mind and body is connected. There is no separation. So every thought, every stressful thought that we have has an impact on the body. And I think this is a nice little summary. So when we're in stress, and especially in chronic stress, we're in this survival state, and we're having thoughts which are often worst case scenarios. Everything feels very urgent or in our mind, and lots of thoughts of fear and doubt. Our body at a basic level is feels unsafe, because our nervous system is activated. And we are disconnected from our human spirit. We're disconnected from who we are, what means something to us in our life, and what really matters. But when we can be regulated, then we can have calm, clear thoughts and feel present in our life. And our body feels regulated and it feels safe. And we can more easily connect to ourselves and to what really matters in our life. Okay, so I'm just going to keep an eye on the time. Right, so what I'm going to ask you to do now is do a little stress reflection exercise. So if hopefully you've got some pen and paper next to you, because by the way, writing, if you can, has its own magic. There is some neuroscience that shows that when we write things down, it helps us process information in a different way. So if you can write down, that would be really useful. And by the way, it doesn't have to make sense in terms of, when I'm not looking for perfect answers or anything like that. And you don't need to share anything. This is for yourself. Nobody else needs to read this. I'd like you to think of something either from today or relatively recently that caused you a little bit of stress, and just please keep it as an everyday situation, something light. So that printer, it's something that happens to me fairly often anyways, when the printer gets jammed and it's like, oh my God, you only have one job to do, why can't you do that? So something like that, or when you're stuck in traffic or you're running late to a meeting, or it can be something from home. If you can think of something, that's great. And then I've got a few questions for you to answer. So just what was happening at the time? What thoughts did I have during that situation? What feelings or emotions was I feeling? And what sensations or feelings did I notice in my body? So I'll just give you an example. Oh, why is it not? Sorry. There we go. So this is something that happened to me on the weekend, actually. I had a haircut booked, and I realised so the hairdresser works at two different locations, and I realised I'd gone to the wrong one. I noticed a little bit too late, and by the time I would have got to the actual appointment, I would have been about 10 minutes late. So I was running late and I was feeling stressed. This was on Saturday. Kind of thoughts that I was having. Why do I always do this? I'm so unorganised. My hairdresser's going to hate me. Now, actually, looking back, I don't always do this. I can realise now. It happens quite infrequently, but in the moment, I realised my thoughts were worst case. I'm always doing this. And yeah, so I'm sure you can think of your own examples of this. I was feeling very anxious and stressed at the time, and my heart was racing. I had a dry mouth, my jaw was clenched, and I had this knot in my stomach. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to reflect on this, and you don't need to fully put yourself back in that situation. You can kind of imagine you're watching it on a screen in front of you, like you're sat in a cinema and you're watching the scene play out in front of you. So just notice from that point of view. And please remember that we're doing this with compassion. because I think that's something we can often forget. We can get very easily into judgment mode and critical mode. So we're just doing it with compassion. We're not judging what we're writing. We're just allowing an honest reflection to emerge. So if that's okay, I'm going to give you about 5 minutes, let's say, to do this. Or perhaps about 4 minutes. I'm just going to give you perhaps another 30 seconds. Okay, so sorry if anybody's still writing, but this is something that you can do in your own time. You've got the questions there. And the reason this is important is because before we can change how we respond to any stressful events, we have to notice, as I said earlier, where we are operating from now. And we do this, as I said, without judgment. That's really important, and please keep that in mind. So we have to notice where we are now. So this is a really useful exercise to do. And again, this is another important point. It's really hard to do this in the moment, because when we're in that stressful situation, if we're not used to doing things a different way, doing this in the moment is really difficult, because our brain has already gone down that pathway that it knows time and time, the way that it's always responded. But if we practice reflecting, so doing this perhaps at the end of the day when you're feeling calm, you're having your evening cup of tea or whatever, and you just reflect on your day and you notice, okay, where did I feel triggered? What was particularly stressful for me? And then going through these questions, you begin to build that muscle of awareness. And as I say, that's the first step, is just kind of noticing how you're reacting in the first place. So yeah, this is a really useful exercise to do. You know, at the start of my journey, I used to do this perhaps once a week, and I still do this when I can. So yeah, it's really useful. Hope you found that helpful. And I'm not going to keep you in the stress. So next up, so yeah, I got you thinking about stressful event, but now we're going to help bring in some calm now. So we're going to do a little bit of a breathwork exercise. And I know people know a lot these days about all these different techniques that can help us, you know, such as breathwork and so on. And even myself, I knew a lot as a GP about breathwork, but the problem was I wasn't actually doing it. And so it's kind of like I had the knowledge, but it's actually the practice of doing it that makes the difference. So I hope that this is a little moment where you can just start to practice these things again and try and integrate them into your day. So even if you do 2 minutes of breath work in the morning in bed, and then a couple of minutes at night when you're in bed again, you know, that all makes a difference, and it gets your body used to feeling like it's in a regulated, safe space. So again, lots of you will have heard of box breathing, but I'm gonna just take you through it now. In fact, actually, before we do this, I just want you to, again, notice how you're breathing now. So if you can, put one hand on your chest and one hand on your belly. And without changing anything, if you can, just for 30 seconds or so, just notice how you're breathing. Just notice which hand's moving. Just notice where the breath is going. Okay, and again, if you can pop into the chat box, if you can, which hand did you notice was moving more? Was it the chest, or was it the one on your stomach? And if somebody could just let me know if anybody shares anything, please.
Yep. So I think it's looking like chest is the most common at the moment, and I can certainly attest to that as well. It's definitely
Yeah.
my chest. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So, I mean, it is a Monday morning, start of the week, so I can imagine some of you are probably in that stress state, because when we're stressed, actually what happens is that we breathe in more into our chest, into our upper chest, and that's actually part of the stress response. We're taking shallow breaths, which are up here, and when we're in a calm, regulated state, what happens is that we breathe more into the belly. So you could probably, if you want, you can practice that now. So what you're trying to do when you breathe in, you're trying to keep the hand on the chest. We're aiming for that to be as still. I mean, obviously it's going to move a little bit, but what you want is the hand on your belly to move. So you'll kind of imagine as if you're breathing into your belly. If you've not done this before, it's going to feel a little bit awkward, but just take maybe a few seconds now. So hands on chest and belly again, and then just practice breathing. Oops, my tummy rumbling. Practice breathing into your belly. And by the way, if you do notice a tummy rumbling, again, that's a good sign, because you're getting into your parasympathetic, your rest and digest. So that's a good sign. Oh, it's really going. So can you notice the difference there? And again, this is just practice, because our body's been so used to being probably in a bit of a survival state that it's got so used to just doing this shallow breathing into the chest. It will take a little bit of time for your body to adjust. But as I say, the more you can practice this, then it becomes more unconscious. It becomes just the normal way. And when you need it, when you are feeling particularly stressed, again, you can do this technique. So let's go through the box breathing. So if you can do the belly breathing while we're doing this, that's great. But if that feels, you know, too much conscious effort, just breathe in a way that feels right for you. So we're going to start the top left corner, and the idea is that we're just breathing around this box. And I like this because it's I'm quite visual. So, and this is just one of many techniques, by the way. You can have a Google, you can see all these different techniques. But for me, this is a good one. But find one that works for you, because there's no perfect technique. It's just one that works for you and one that you're actually going to do. So for this one, we're going to breathe around the box, which means we're going to inhale for 4 seconds. And then we're going to hold the inhale for 4 seconds, then we're going to exhale for 4 seconds, and then we're going to keep our breath exhaled for 4 seconds. So let's just take a minute to practice that in your own pace. You can keep your hands on your belly and chest if you like, or not, that's fine. Okay, so hopefully you've found that kind of nice and calming. Again, if this is something that you're not used to doing, it just takes practice. Everything that you're doing for the first time feels a little bit odd, but over time this can become a really nice calming thing to do. As I say, when you're starting to feel that little bit of stress, just taking a minute to do this. And nobody needs to know, you don't have to put your hands there. I just put them there to kind of make sure that I'm breathing in the right space, but you don't need to do that. And just doing it for a couple of minutes can really help. So that's a nice technique for you. And what I thought is I could guide you through a little bit of a guided meditation and help you to go even further into a bit of a calm space. Now, so again, lots of you may have already have a meditation practice. If you don't, I know from personal experience, the thought of something like meditation can bring up lots of different ideas. I just want to kind of put it out there now. There's no right or wrong. It's not about stopping thoughts. We can never stop our thoughts. They're always going to come into our awareness. Meditation is not meant to be about that. It's just about noticing. It's about noticing what thoughts are coming in. So if you have lots of thoughts come in, that's okay. Just notice them. Imagine they're kind of like drifting past like clouds, and just allow them to go away. And you'll notice the next thought, and you just allow it to go away. If during the practice, you do become distracted by a thought, that's okay. Just come back to my voice, or come back to the sensation of your feet on the floor, or come back to your breath. You don't have to have your eyes closed if you don't want to. If that feels uncomfortable for you, you can just soften your gaze or look down, whatever feels right for you. So I hope everybody feels ready. It's going to be about 10 minutes or so. So if you're in a comfortable position, just have your feet flat on the floor. And we're going to start by just bringing a gentle awareness to our breath. And as I say, if you're happy to, close your eyes now. And just start by noticing your breath as it flows in and flows out. No need to change anything at this point, just noticing. Noticing that steady breath that we don't have to control, and that supports us without us needing to think about it. Perhaps notice the temperature of the air as it comes in, noticing the temperature as it leaves the body. And then begin by bringing your awareness again to your feet, and just noticing the contact between the soles of your feet and the surface below. Just noticing that steady support that is there. And just bring your awareness up to your lower legs, to your calves. Just noticing what's present. No need to change anything. Just noticing if there's any sensations here. Perhaps they feel hot or cold. Perhaps there's a little bit of tightness in the muscles. Just noticing. And if it feels supportive and easy to do with your next breath, perhaps invite some softening into this area with your breath, allowing your muscles to relax if you can. And then bringing that awareness up to your upper legs, to your thighs. And again, just noticing the contact between your thighs and the chair beneath you. Anything else you can sense here? Any tension or tightening? And again, with your breath, if you would like, you can allow some softening in this area. And bringing that awareness up to your pelvic area now. And this is somewhere where a lot of women hold tension. And so just beginning to notice what your pelvic area feels like. And it's those muscles that you use when you go to the bathroom. And just noticing, how do they feel? Is there any tension here? And if you can, with your breath, inviting a bit of ease into this area. Blowing that awareness up into your lower stomach now. Again, just noticing how this area feels. Can you invite some softening into your lower belly? You're noticing your lower back. You feel the support between your back and the chair. And now bring that awareness up into your chest and your upper back. And again, just noticing what's here. If you feel any tightening, can you allow your breath to soften this area? If you can't, that's okay too. And flowing that awareness now up into your shoulders and your neck. Again, with your breath, seeing if you can invite some softening. Now flowing that awareness all the way down your arms, your upper arms, your forearms, and your hands, all the way to the end of your fingers. And just perhaps noticing how your arms feel in your lap. And with your breath, see if you can invite some ease into these areas. Bring awareness now to your jaw. Notice how your jaw feels in this moment. Perhaps you'd like to allow your jaw to soften by opening your mouth a little bit and allowing your tongue to rest. Bring awareness now to your cheeks and the muscles in your cheeks. And then around your eyes, the small muscles around your eyes and your forehead. allow them to rest. Now perhaps you can become aware of your whole body, just feeling safe and supported, with nothing for you to do except follow my voice and take this time for yourself. Perhaps this would be a good moment to think of something that you can be grateful for, because it's often easy for us to focus on the negative things, but it can be so important to remember there is so much that is already going well in our life. So choose something that you can be grateful for in this moment. It can be small, it can be big, whatever feels right to you. It can be a person, it can be something that's happened in your life recently, whatever is right. And just bring that thing or object to your mind. And it can help by putting a hand over your chest as you do this. And as you think about this, just imagine there's a beautiful light entering as you breathe in through your nose or your mouth, and it flows in and it meets your chest, your hand, sorry, in your chest on the inside. And it's a beautiful warm light. And as you breathe, it starts to fill your chest as you feel that gratitude. I'll just give you a moment. And as you breathe, it becomes easier to feel that feeling in your chest and that warmth. And when you're ready, just allow that feeling to wash over you like a wave, spreading from your chest all the way to the top of your head and all the way down to the tips of your toes. Like a beautiful wave of gratitude. Allow it to spread all over your body, and as you breathe in now, allow it to merge with every cell of you. And in a moment, we're going to come back to the room, but as you do, just allow yourself to feel a bit more ease in your day. Quiet knowing that as you move through the day, you can bring some of this feeling back with you into the rest of today and the rest of your week. And that this space is accessible to you whenever you need to. So take a couple of more deeper breaths in and out. And in your own time, just become aware again of the chair beneath you. And you might want to wiggle your fingers or your toes. And just start to come back to the room that you're in. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Okay. So how was that? If anybody wants to share how that felt in a word or two, you'd be very welcome to. And if you found it difficult, by the way, to follow along, again, it's all just a practice. If sitting still is not something that we're used to, then it can be difficult for our conscious mind to let go. But it's like, I always say, it's like training a puppy that doesn't sit still. It just takes time, it just takes practice, and it's a skill that can be developed. Are there any responses that anybody has shared?
Yep, so we've just got one that says very relaxing, relaxing but hard to let go of work worries as you're doing it. And I think I can very much vouch for that. I think there were kind of thoughts coming in and out all the time, and you're trying to shush them down a little bit. But yeah, went down well, I
Okay.
think.
Thank you. Well, thank you for following along. And I just want to say that's such a common experience, that the thoughts, as I said, they don't stop coming, and we can almost feel, you know, we get into, as I said before, we get into this critical frame of mind where we think, oh gosh, why can't I do this? Why can't I shut off my thoughts? We're not trying to, we're just noticing, and we're letting them pass. But again, it just improves. It's a skill that improves, and even just having that compassion, because I certainly wasn't used to doing that, kind of treating myself with compassion, that in itself is something that we do need to practice, as hard as it sometimes feels, as cringy as it can feel. It's really important. It's really important we show ourselves that compassion, and try not to judge ourselves when we find things difficult, such as this. But as I say, it's something that if you do want to practice, and you can start with just a minute of or a shorter meditation, and there's plenty on YouTube that you can look at, and I will be sharing a link to an audio as well that you're welcome to have to practice with. But thank you very much for doing that. So just, what time are we on? Right, so yeah, just want to, before I finish, just kind of round up a little bit of what I've shared today. And if there were 3 things that, you know, I would like you to take away, it's just to remember that stress is not just something that's in the mind. It affects our body in a very real sense, and as I said, our spirit, or our connection to self, especially if we develop chronic stress or we're in survival mode a lot of the time. But the good news is that it's not something that needs a big overhaul in your life to address. It's not about doing everything differently. It's the first step is noticing, as I said, it's noticing where you are at the moment, how you're responding to it, to stress and things in your life at the moment. That's the first step, and doing it with kindness and compassion. As I say, I can't overstress that. And small moments, so a couple of minutes of breath work, for example, through the day, they really do add up. They make a huge difference. So the more you can start to integrate these things, and it can, I often tell my clients, it's about habit stacking, or I can never remember the term, it's gone out of my head completely, but adding on a habit to something that you already do. So for example, it could be that when you brush your teeth, after you've done that, you do a couple of minutes of breath work. So you're not having to remember to do this at a different time. You're already brushing your teeth, so this can just be a natural add-on after that. Or have reminders set up on your phone to remind you to do breath work a couple of times a day. And as I said, you have that stress reflection as well. That can be a useful exercise to look at what thoughts you were having in the moment, and you can begin to gradually shift those thoughts as well, or kind of gently question those thoughts. Are they even real? Are they true? So that's a very quick run through. Obviously, this is just a quick taster of what stress using a mind-body approach looks like. I hope you found that useful. And as I mentioned, I do have a link to a free audio. Disclosure, it does ask for your email and name to join my subscriber list. And because what I do now is I coach people using this mind, body, spirit approach, and I help high achieving women move from a life that might look amazing on paper, but it doesn't feel great on the inside. So I help them to get out of survival mode and into a life that they love. So yes, I'm just starting up this particular way of coaching. So I do have a website that's going to be launched very soon. And if you'd like to join my email list, then I'll be sharing group programs that I've got coming up as well. So thank you very much. I have left a few minutes for questions if anybody has any. I'll stop sharing my screen in a minute. If I can work it out. Yeah, there we go. No problem. Oh, I can put the chat, sorry, the link as well into the chat if anybody had trouble.
Thank you
with the QR code.
Thank you for such a useful session and a topic which I think is such a major issue for so many of us in our personal and work lives. I just want to mention as well that our campaign in May is National Walking Month. So look out for that on our social media pages, because walking is, I think, a good example of ways, as you were talking about, of managing stress, you know, throughout the day and doing small things. So I'm a big advocate for walking. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. There's lots of things you can do, but that's just one example. And also just like to apologise for any inconvenience caused by the incorrect joining link being included in the booking form at start. So apologies if you did miss them this session, but as we mentioned earlier, the recording and the slides we added to our website. I'll put the link in the chat in a minute. We have got a feedback form as well. If people could just complete that, I'll put that in the chat. It's just really useful for future planning future sessions. So sorry, I just wanted to mention those few things quickly. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to put your hand up or pop it in the chat. Or it could be comments as well, anything you want to share.
Thank you. Yeah, just to pick up on your point about the walking, it's such, again, an underrated activity, but it's so important. And one thing I do is try and make my walks mindful. So that activity I shared at the start, the mindful moment with the 5 senses, taking a few minutes just as you're walking to run through that is just another way of bringing you back into the present moment as well.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Really good tip. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I'm glad people found it useful. If anybody does have any questions that they want to email me directly with, I'm very happy for that as well. So yeah, thank you very much.